Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host Brian Keane, online fitness coach, nutritionist and 3-time best-selling author, here to help you by deconstructing expert guests on all things health, fitness and mindset. Today's guest is with world-renowned osteopath James Davies, and when I think of expert guests, they don't get more or much more expert than today's guest. Some of his clients include David Beckham, Wicks, Kylie Minogue, Sir Lenny Henry, Mo Farah, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, amongst other Premier League footballers, World Cup rugby stars and professional athletes across different ranges, from rugby union, NFL, Premier League, football to Olympic athletes. An absolute resume that is second to none when it comes to rehabilitation and working with individuals. And in today's podcast, we talk with James about his new book, Body, Simple Techniques and Strategies to Heal, Reset and Restore. And we go through a lot of different topics today, from the advantages to injury being, or prevention being better than cure when it comes to injury, some of his favorite methods from cold and heat, to dynamic versus static stretching, to what you can do in the gym to prevent injury, to how you can rehabilitate out, and everything in between. So in today's episode, very heavy on the injury prevention and injury rehabilitation side. So I've also mentioned another podcast with Dr. Stone where we covered this in a previous episode, more so with the anabolic therapies that they use. And in today's podcast, we go very specific to things you can do in your everyday life that will help with rehabilitation and injury prevention, regardless of what stage you're at, whether you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s or beyond, whether you're an athlete or somebody looking to lose weight and just be the fittest you can be. So without further ado, here is today's podcast with world-renowned osteopath James Davies on simple techniques and strategies to reduce pain, overcome weakness and recover from injury. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today with my guest, James Davies. Nicknamed the Sherlock Holmes of body pain diagnosis, James is a world-renowned osteopath, performance coach and recovery specialist. He has worked throughout the UK, USA, Europe and Jamaica with professional athletes ranging from Olympic champions, premiership footballers, NFL and rugby union players, as well as A-list clients from music, film and TV. Clients include David Beckham, Wicks, Kylie Minogue, Sir Lenny Henry and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, amongst others. James developed the ethos of relieve, restore and perform based on your personal experience as a young athlete. He aims to help everyone understand how their bodies work, causes of their pain, how to spot the warning signs the body gives us when our systems have been over-compromised or compromised, and learn strategies to reduce pain, improve flexibility, overcome weakness and recover from injury. His new book, Body, Simple Techniques and Strategies to Heal, Reset and Restore, is available now, and we'll be unpacking it in today's show. James, welcome to the podcast.
Well, that's the intro. I love that.
And I had to condense that, James, when I was going through. There was just a million things that I could have gone, and again, I'm sure we'll touch on some of it as we go through the podcast. But mate, you're doing incredible work, and I'm really excited for this chat. But before we get into it, for anyone in the audience that's unfamiliar with you, talk to us about your backstory into kind of health, wellness, fitness. I know this is kind of the start of the book, when the introduction, anything is possible, so it can kind of double over as your backstory. But talk to us about it.
Oh, so I had a dream, simple as that, to go to the Olympics as an athlete, because my first PE teacher said that I was gifted in terms of sprinting. So one of my heroes was Linford Christie. So everyone saw him win at 1992 at Barcelona. That's what inspired me to want to do 100 meters. But that dream was left in tatters when I had a quad injury. So when I did an exam for my A-levels in the PE class, I tore my quad, and I know now it was a significant tear. And it was poorly managed during that time. So that's led to me trying to run back on it, not having the knowledge that I needed to rest for a long period of time. And it was just getting worse and worse. And then I had a surgery on it that they took a little bit of the muscle out, as well as calcified tissue, because when a muscle is poorly managed, it can calcify. So I had a lot of calcification in my quad. So they had to take some of the healthy muscle out. So every time when I returned back to running after the surgery, I would always have a spasm and it will re-tear again. So my dreams were left in the dustbin, really. And I needed another dream. And that led to me choosing to be an osteopath. And I had that tunnel vision to want to be a therapist for the Great Britain team. So I did all I can, tried to open those doors that I thought would be shut, and just made it happen. And it happened. I hit that Mount Everest going to the London Olympics, and with various Caribbean athletes and American athletes. But the biggest dream was with Team GB at the Rio Olympics. And since then, it's just been getting better and better. And I just love to help. I love a challenge. I really love working in sports. I love it when I see a growth of an athlete going from injury to winning things, or just achieving the goals that they set out to do. Because I didn't want anyone to go through what I went through, having their dreams crushed.
Yeah, you have so much experience with so many top level athletes. As I said, I only was half joking when I said that I had to condense your profile to get us started. You know, but for people listening, before we kind of dive into the book, and anyone that's not familiar with osteopath and what that is, explain to us what an osteopath is, just because there's obviously different areas of rehabilitation and sometimes can be misconceptions. So just kind of get a grounding for anyone unfamiliar with it. Explain what an osteopath does, and then that will give us a nice little transition out.
So the general definition for osteopath is somebody that uses their hands to assess an area, come up with a diagnosis using their hands, and they try to establish the function if the function is lost in that area, bring harmony to the area, working on the muscles, the ligaments and the tendons. But we use a holistic approach. So you might have lower back pain, but we don't only treat where you're feeling the pain. We will assess and say, okay, maybe your shoulder is contributing to you having the back pain, or maybe a joint isn't functioning well in your ankle, so too much pressure's going into your lower back. So that's how we work. But therapy is an art. So I'm an artist, and there's different ways of doing things. So it's a common question that people ask me, what is the difference between a physiotherapist, an osteopath, a chiropractor? So I can go through the generals. So a chiropractor will normally use an x-ray for diagnosis, and the treatments might last a couple of minutes to 50 minutes max, or can be longer. But their main process is manual therapy. So they would be clicking joints. And a physiotherapist, they normally work under the NHS. And their main thing is that they do rehab exercises. So they'll be more experienced having the rehab protocol for different sections of the body. So that's the general definitions, but every therapist is different and they have their own way. So there's different ways from going from A to B. A being in pain, B being not being in pain, but there's so many tools. So you look at me, so I have a Mary Poppins bag of skills. So I will bring out cupping, I'll bring out acupuncture, I'll use my hands. There's so many gadgets like tachytherapy, that's Italian, that's a radio frequency, that's non-invasive, or there's shockwave. So the list goes on. And that's the joy of it, because I'm always learning. I'm not a finished article, and I've just got to keep up with the times, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah, one of my favorite things in the book, as I was telling you, what I did was I read part 1 and then I jumped straight into, in part 2, it's broken down from like head to toe, neck, shoulders, upper back, elbows. I jumped straight into kind of knee and hip, where I've had previous injuries, but also you had a breakdown of what all of those things were in terms of the different recovery protocols. So as somebody who's a bit of a recovery geek when it comes to my own training, I loved it. I was like, markers and highlight on the PDF file. So I was absolutely loving that. But I want to talk about the start of the book, because I think it gives us a nice little jumping off point to different body parts, different areas. You talk about the origins of pain. It's the first chapter or second chapter. It's very early on in the book. Talk to us about this. And what I love about what you do is, I know you've worked with those high level athletes, and there's definitely a handful that listen to this podcast, but it's mostly general population, people who work out, who are active, who go to the gym. And your book is very much geared towards a long list of individuals, from what I can tell and from what I've read, because pain is across the board. Of course, high level athletes are going to expose themselves to more conditions where that pain, their threshold might need to be higher, but the origins of pain are very, very similar for the majority of people. Talk to us about where that comes from in terms of the origin of pain and what we need to know about that before we jump into any specific body part.
Oh, it's a pleasure to just go through this now. So everyone is different, but this book is for everybody, seriously. And that chapter, I'm so proud of it, because it took a long time to kind of think of a simplistic way but effective way to get my points across. So First of all, everyone needs to know that pain isn't a negative thing always. It's actually a protector. It's our best friend. It's our way that we get clues that we need to stay away from danger or not put our hand through the fire. Because if you take that away, we are going to be in a dangerous situation every single time. So this was the biggest thing. Many people didn't know how to express how they feel in terms of pain. So if they went to see someone such as myself or a doctor or any type of medical practitioner, they didn't know how to verbalize how they were feeling. So I just take the reader through the journey of how to express that. So there's different types of pain. There's nociceptive pain, which is tissue pain. There's neuropathic pain, which is nerve pain. And then there's emotional pain, something that many years ago, many people would say that it's all in your head. There's no such thing as emotional pain. So pain is a complex thing, but the way how I've written it, I want anyone to learn the core principles of pain and use it. So I go through telling people that you need to rate your pain. So try not to be vague. So it can be that I'm feeling a 1 out of 10 in my muscle when I wake up in the morning, and then when I start running, it's a 6 out of 10. Because when you try and use a descriptive in terms of putting a number on the pain, that would get a therapist such as myself to kind of process and solve the case and see what's going on. But pain has different characteristics, so you have to look at the way how you describe pain. So if it's a nerve pain, it will be a burning or tingling pain. If it's like a muscle pain, it might be an ache. So when you start to use these types of words or say that it's a deep pain instead of a superficial pain, it helps us to diagnose better.
What are some of the myths and misconceptions in this? Is another. Now, as soon as someone writes a book that I'm interested in and there's a myths and misconceptions, I love those sections of books. But talk about what some of the myths and misconceptions are that you frequently see, James.
I think the biggest one in this country, everyone assumes that as we age, life is over, that we're going to have a limp, that it's normal to feel achy. Of course, as we age, there's some form of degeneration, but it's getting into good habits quickly, because we are a nation that don't move. If you don't move, you're going to seize up. And I'm not telling people that you need to go to the gym an hour every single day, because everyone's different. People might adjust to that, but the common theme for people, there's so many people that are stressed at the moment, paying the energy bills, worrying about the mortgages, worrying about all these things, or having a job where they're so exhausted. I kind of educate them, just get moving, even if it's just a couple of minutes a day. That's better than nothing. And if you move more as you're younger, or even when you're older, it's going to limit the amount of pain that you feel. And you aren't going to feel stiff, and you're going to feel fully energized. So that's the biggest myths and misconceptions, I think.
I'm very curious, as somebody I don't want to be a focus group of one here, but anecdotally, when I've been injured in the past, and as someone that played sport, I went into competitive bodybuilding. I now do ultra marathons and endurance events. But I found when I'm injured, my stress and anxiety go way up. And one of the things that caught me from the book is you talk about stress and anxiety. Have you found that they're quite heavily linked in terms of our body's ability to repair, and managing that stress and anxiety contributes to it? Or is it something that just so that you're actually able to do what you need to do in terms of physically repairing your body, your rehabilitation, etc., it's important to have your mindset right? What's your kind of thought when it comes to the link between stress and anxiety and injury rehabilitation in particular?
Well, I think the biggest word to summarize that is balance. So we need to have a reset every day, or when we have an injury, we need a big reset and reassess our recoveries that we do every single day. Because good stress is good, but it can be bad if it's too much. So it's moderation. So we can be training for a marathon, and we're saying that I need to hit these miles every day leading to a marathon so we can taper well. If you don't have a reset and it's not managed well, it's too much overload that can lead to injury. And the best athletes that I've seen in the world are the ones, so everyone can have the same talent, have the same mindset, but if the recovery is wrong and not executed well, it's game over. So you look at people like your Usain Bolts, your Mo Farahs, all these people that were at the top of their game, and it was a pleasure to just observe it. They had the best team that had the best recovery at the perfect time, and they rehearsed it for 4 years for that moment being the Olympic final to execute.
With recovery, James, would you say this is, and again, I don't want to take a snippet of a trite soundbite, but is prevention really better than cure? Is that the way to approach it with recovery?
100%. So you look at me, I am an ice bath fanatic.
Same.
It has changed my life. It made me write a book. And people will say that there's no research, there's none of this, all of these things. I'm talking about that. First of all, going back to this artist thing, or going back to a problem solver or solving a case, you need to mix the research with common sense and trial and error in the safe zone. So merging three of these things makes you a specialist, it makes you elite. And that's what I found with working with a lot of top athletes. If you get the right unison or the right harmony with three of those things, you can move mountains and achieve a lot.
What did you find is and I'm very curious for somebody that's obviously a big reader with your book now as well, but other books too, that of high performers, and what seems to separate them from, the average person or somebody who has an aspiration to be at a similar level. Do you find with the high-end elite athletes, it's that they take their recovery so much more seriously, and as a result they're able to perform at that high level? And if that's the case, what are some of the things that you found? Obviously you mentioned ice there, that general population such as myself, I would put myself in that bracket, could potentially apply. Is there other tools and strategies, prevention methods that we could use that could potentially support our ability to recover faster for our runs or for gym workouts, etc.?
I think another word as well is consistency. I think that's what makes these elite people to have an edge upon anyone else, and we can do it. It's just being realistic and true to ourselves and not being hard, but having a team that can assist us or help us. So it can just be that. So for example, for me to operate well, I do an ice bath every single day, and I know that that's not going to appeal to like everybody, but that gets me right. I never feel tired and I'm energized. But it can be something as simple as having a cold shower or using a cold compress on your head. That can be effective in people feeling good. So I think it's definitely the consistency and just assessing everything, taking a step backwards and reflecting on your day, how it went, and just rest and digest. Because if you don't do that, you're always going to be tense, and that leads back to that stress and anxiety. It's going to overflow, because when that's on the Richter scale of too much fight and flight, it's going to make our muscles tense, and all of our systems are not going to be functioning effectively. So going back to the ice, that's a good shock for like me. It makes me feel really, really good, and it just resets my body.
I love the ice. I've been I ran through the Arctic in 2019, and I was doing a lot of the Wim Hof breathing in the ice and cryotherapy, and the amount of recovery benefit that you get. The mental health benefit's incredible as well, because you come out and you feel amazing from the ice, but that physical rejuvenation. What's your theory then on heat? How do you like heat when it comes to a recovery protocol?
Heat is good because it's like exercise and it raises your heart rate. So I do both. So I go to the extreme cold, and I go into the extreme heat. And my buddy that I do it with is Joe Wicks.
Yeah.
It's like, seriously.
He's been on the podcast too. Joe's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Mate, seriously, he is truly the body coach, because I've got to be honest, looking back at me, so I'm good at the recovery side, but I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the mental side. I didn't want to work out because I had that old athlete mentality that I had to be like brutal to myself and do a 2-hour session to get the best benefits. But meeting Joe, he just told me straight, you need to start to lose weight. You need to get on it. So having someone good in your team, being Joe, that I look up to, got me to work out more.
With the heat cold, just out of curiosity from yours, because you're the expert, I'm very curious to pick your brain. Yeah. Do you do it in an order in terms of cold heat or heat cold? Do you start with the cold first and then the heat, or do you flip it, or what's your protocol?
So I start with the cold first, and then I come out and I do some breathing exercises, and then I go straight into the heat, and it works. It works for me. I just feel really, really good.
Yeah, I love that. And outside of that, then when it comes to overall recovery, what are the other kind of tools that you like to recommend to people? Obviously there's a million different things people can do, but where do you tell them to focus their attention on?
I think it's meditation, but everyone just assumes meditation is you're crossing your legs and you're humming. But it can just be that you find a quiet space. So I love to look at the stars at nighttime. So that's me. I shut everything off because I think everyone's worrying too much about things. So even just a minute or 2 minutes where you just go away from the world and you don't think about nothing and you just go into a trance. And that can be you sitting on the sofa, can you be being back outside, or it could be you just on your bed. And that is the best thing ever, because you start to have those light bulb moments. Maybe I should write a book. Yeah, that's a good idea. Or, oh, maybe I should spend more time with my kids because I've been working a lot this week. Like, so all of these things come into your heads, because if we are doing too much for our bodies are going to shut down slowly, and we're going to check for these clues. So important. And that's why I wrote this book. I take people on a journey, a roadmap in finding these clues, because sometimes they are hard. And sometimes, or like one of the myths is that everyone thinks it's normal to feel stiff. Everyone thinks it's normal to feel tired. You know, yeah, this is middle age. This is me being middle aged. I'm meant to be tired, but it's not like that. And I saw that when I traveled across the whole world. There were people that were in the 90s doing squats in India or different places that I went. So it's just about putting ourselves first at times, and that's not being selfish. People just assume it's being selfish, like think about ourselves and no one else.
Well, you can't give from an empty cup. Like, I think
Exactly.
looking after yourself first. One of the things there that jumped out, James, is the importance of listening to your body. And as somebody who definitely had a breakdown in thinking, as a kind of that athlete mindset of, because you can push past pain. Like, I've pushed past injuries. I've trained with broken bones and worked out and played matches with broken bones. You can, but you shouldn't, but you can do it. Talk to us about the importance of listening to our body.
It's so important, because it might get to a stage where something is irreversible, or it's going to be hard. It's going to take years to get that function back. That's why we have to listen to our body. So it's going back to that pain scale. If something's a 1 out of 10, keep an eye on it. If it gets to 3 or 4, you have to do something about it. If it gets to a 7 or 8, you definitely need to go and see somebody or have a process to eliminate that pain. But it's going back to the athletes. So there's some amazing athletes out there that are super talented, that they might win a Wimbledon, go win something big. But what separates someone elite and anyone back at home cannot do is having the longevity. You need to do something in terms of the recovery or smart training. I think that's the biggest thing. You got to do smart training so your body doesn't break down.
What are some of the preemptive exercises then that people can do? Because I know the book talks about like 10, 15 minutes a day, these exercises that people can do to prevent pain. What are some examples of that? So
I want people in the day to spread out the exercises into 15 minutes, because talking to loads of patients, the common theme is that they don't have time. They don't have time to exercise. So I get them to multitask. So it can be that you're brushing your teeth and you can jog on the spot. If you're just woken up in bed, where you can do some bridges, or you can do something with your legs to move around, or when you get out of bed, you can do a stretch, or you can do a lunge or a squat, because you might feel that, it's not much, but doing something is better than nothing.
With common, what I would call, I won't necessarily say high risk moves, but high risk reward moves, such as like a deadlift is one that I think of straight away. Like, I love a deadlift as a movement, but it's a high risk to reward. You perform it incorrectly, the risk of injury is very, very high, but perform correctly, it's a very good movement. With gym based movements like, say, squats, deadlifts, so compound lifts, what are some of the things that people need to consider when it comes to injuries around those movements? And the reason I ask that is they're the movements that I get more often than not on social media. People being like, I squatted X and now I have Y problem, or I deadlifted X and now I have Y problem. What are some of the things people should consider when they're performing? Because most people listening to this program or listening to this podcast, apologies, will have some form of those movements in their program. So I'm curious what you'd advise on it.
So my tips and tricks in the gym, and this is my opinion, is that when someone does a set, they don't really recover in time for the next set. So that's a good chance to use a massage gun or to get someone to assess your back. If it's a personal trainer, to see, okay, have you overloaded? Can you do another set? So there's times that we don't need to stick to the plan, and that's what makes an elite coach and the trainers that I've seen in the past, that if an athlete looked very good in one set, they would be like, okay, let's leave it there because I'll work you harder another day. So that's what I see. But the deadlift is the common thing that I get. There have been so many patients in the past that have done a deadlift and the back or bum is already tight, and they've done something to the disc. So they've like herniated the disc, or the fibers of the outer disc have been torn. So I think that you need to get your body warmed up well before doing a deadlift. So there are different factors. You have to look at the weight. You have to make sure that the weight's good. You're going to make sure that your form is good, and that's the biggest one. So is somebody looking at your form, or are you just going in there blindly lifting heavy, putting your body out at risk?
Do you find, and you're the expert on this, James, and again, I won't speak to it because I only have personal experience. Although I've worked a little bit with athletes, it's more so with their nutrition and their gym-based program, their actual strength and conditioning. But with injuries, this is something I will always outsource. It'll be your book, but also other physios and osteopaths and rehabilitation specialists that I know. But with injuries, do you find that if you don't treat one, it can have a knock-on effect, i.e. something in the kinetic chain is weak? So for example, I've had problems with, groin and hamstrings, but it was from a weakness in glutes, which then tightened up my lower back, and injuries kind of spread through the body. Is that something that's quite frequently common or something you see regularly?
100% all the time, and that's what leads to that solving the case. It can be the body's a very clever thing in compensating. So if you've injured your knee and you've lost the full range of flexion of bending the knee, the body will find a way to compensate, and it can be that the hip might be working hard or the foot might be working hard. So you can get by as the years go by. Then the brain says, I've had enough. I'm going to cause a lot of pain, so you do something about it because you haven't been listening to me for like 15 months. So I'm going to make it worse. And then if someone comes and sees me like that, a case history is so important because I track to where it originated. So that's why in the book I use a mnemonic called STOP. So S is for sight, the site of pain. T is for the type of pain. O is for the onset of pain. So when did it first start? What were the clues? And P is what makes it worse. What provokes it? So to answer your question, everyone is different, but you have to backtrack the date of when the dysfunction happened in the body. And sometimes the patient will not realize that, oh, I thought that my lower back was okay because I don't feel pain. But that must be linked to the foot, James. Don't you think? So like in that session, I am learning and the patient's learning, but the patient's helping me because the patient's voice is so important. And I'm trying to teach them in this book that you need to be heard and get your points across with the right terminology to the right person.
And what I love about the book, and this is actually how I've been using it firsthand, I joked with you right before we went on air that I jumped straight into the knee section, but that's quite closely related to the hip and lower back. I've been struggling with a groin injury for years, and I've been using your book to try and slightly self-diagnose where that's potentially coming from, because I've been working glutes and I've been working with loosening up quads, and it hasn't been working in terms of the injury keeps coming back. But I've been using your book as trying to magnify or illuminate some potential areas that I've missed. So I love that you've done that. So I'll definitely check back in with you when I've gone through that in more detail.
Amazing.
When, James, then do you think people should consider working with a therapist? At what point or at what stage? Because like, as I mentioned there, the way I'm using your book, it's to kind of nearly self-diagnose what I could potentially do myself, which I think is a brilliant way for people to consider using this, especially those who are athletes, training in the gym regularly. It's just a tool book you can jump in and out of based on, well, this is what I'm trying to address at the minute. But at what point should somebody consider, well, it's time to look into therapy or working with a therapist to potentially heal this or rehabilitate from this?
So going back to that point, prevention is better than cure. And a good way of doing that, so I do teach the reader that going to get a checkup, just like a dentist appointment, once a month or once every 6 weeks is so important, because the body is always tense in different areas. So you don't want it to get to a point where it's like a lot of pain. So that's the first thing. I do understand that people might not be able to afford someone such as myself or a therapist. So this book is a toolbox in terms of diagnosis, but it comes up with solutions. So self-help things, and having getting a buddy that can actually place their hands on you and do safe techniques that can help alleviate pain. But going back to the groin, I love the groin. And through my experience, when I treat a groin, if I'm doing massage in there, it's always good to treat the belly of the muscle. But I've realised that it's the origin and the insertion. So, like, if you cover all those areas, particularly the origin of where the groin muscles, the adductor muscles are, working on there and doing some functional movement. So there's something called active release, where you place a thumb on the tendon of the adductor or the groin, then you move the leg around. And in most cases, that's effective with groin issues.
Oh, that's very helpful. I will. I will be going back and I'll be writing down exactly what you said there to make mental note for myself.
Bless
James,
you.
what's some of the, and I appreciate that. Thank you, by the way.
No worries.
When it comes to some of the biggest mistakes people make, and I would completely assume it's the same. Again, false consensus bias. I'd assume what I do is what everyone else does, but it's probably something completely different. But one of the biggest mistakes I've made is ignoring the pain and just kind of, I'll warm up and it'll go away. And that happens with a lot of injuries, that you have that warning signal and then you warm up and you're like, actually it's fine. And then as soon as you stop and cool down again, the pain comes back. And I could go on for months and months and months like that before I'd actually decide, not now, but earlier on in my life, months and months without treating it. But from your experience, what's some of the biggest mistakes or most common mistakes people make when it comes to, just even if it's listening to their body or their rehabilitation or the prevention being better than cure that you mentioned, what's one of the biggest mistakes people make?
I think the biggest thing is that people don't know the difference between pain and discomfort. So if something's in the pain, if you stop, for example, if it's five-a-side football and you're playing with the lads, then you feel an electric shock pain or like a cramp in your thigh, and then you stop and then you try and do it again and it cramps up, but it's a lot worse. That's a red flag that you must stop. you know, if you haven't trained in a long time and you go to the gym and the next morning you feel a bit achy, that's kind of more like a discomfort, and it's kind of good that your body isn't used to it. So as you start or initiate the process of working out again, there is going to be a couple of days you might feel tight, but in a couple of weeks you're going to feel good. And that's normally in athletes, when they go away for the summer, they come back to that training, they are feeling all types of discomfort, and they're thinking, why am I a footballer? I shouldn't be doing this. I want to go on holiday. I want to go to Ibiza or my all the different places that they go to, you know. So it's finding the difference there. But you have said it, people don't stretch out enough and or like warming up, because people would just assume the only warming up is you get on the treadmill. Which is great because you need to boost your cardiovascular, but you need, so I am someone that would say that you need to do static stretches, you need to do dynamic stretches, you need to do, but it's the dosage. So like I won't do a static stretch for a minute, but I might do it for a couple of seconds. Then I'll do more of a dynamic stretch. And I only know this because the likes of Usain Bolts, your Dina Asher-Smiths, Mo Farahs, your Jess Ennis's, watching them, they had a thorough warm-up. Someone like a Mo would like warm up for more than an hour, but it'd be a dynamic type of warm-up, and then he would go and see a therapist and go back and forth.
Can you explain just quickly the difference for anyone that's not familiar with the difference between static and dynamic stretches?
So a static stretch is when you're holding it, so there's no bouncing, you're just basically holding a stretch. A dynamic thing is when, so if you want to warm up your like hips, it can be that you're swinging your legs, so you're holding on to a wall and you're swinging your legs back and forth. But if you want to stretch your quad in a static stretch, you just basically, the most common one is that you lift one leg up bent and the other leg is straight, and you just hold it. That's a static stretch.
Yeah, love that. Talk about what body freedom means to you. I think I love the holistic approach. We kind of opened the podcast with that, but that reset and body freedom, it kind of ends the book in the last part. But talk to us what body freedom means to you in terms of your own explanation of what that means and how it's applicable for people.
I think it's being free. It's being light. You're feeling light. You feel that you can skip around and just feel I'm good. It feels that you're fully optimum, that everything's functioning well, that you can run a marathon or you can do a certain activity that you were worried about. And it's just having a knowledge in how your body works, because I feel many people don't, sadly.
With that then, I'm very curious, because something that I didn't do from my 20s that I am now obsessed with in my 30s is recovery in general. And I know that you talk about the different stages of your life and the best way to care for your body. And it's funny because I didn't do recovery in my 20s and I paid for it in my late 20s from not doing it early on, and now I'm militant with it. General rule for me is every hour I spend training, I do at least an hour of recovery, whether it's trigger point or deep tissue or cryo or ice, just to balance it out. As we age, what have you seen as some of the common trends that people need to consider and look after? Is it something that recovery goes up as we age because of degeneration, or is it a case that we actually always need it? It's just that we can get away with it a little bit longer, similar to someone with a fast metabolism in school, and then they have to clean up their nutrition in their 20s because their metabolism isn't as high as it was when they were 16. What's been your experience with that?
So first of all, we only get one body, so we have to take care of it. And it's not seen as a chore or, oh no, like I've got to do this. Like it has to be a habit. It's making the right culture in our house so it's second nature to us. So the sooner that we get into that, we will have more body freedom and we'll feel really good in ourselves. So it's giving our body time and to like do anything, because everyone's different. Everyone is different. Ice bath might not work for like somebody else, but it's their job. And I do talk about this in the book, that I take them on a journey again to think about what they can do for their bodies and make it fun. Do a trial and error. Do a trial and error in that safe zone again of things that you can do that can make you feel good in yourself and make you feel energetic and pain-free.
Where did the nickname come from? The Sherlock Holmes of body pain diagnosis. I love that, but I'm curious where it came from.
It happened in track and field when I was working for the Great Britain team. It was the athletes like Perry Shakes Drayton, because she had knee issues, and I started working with her for a bit, and she was just saying, "Oh, you were the Sherlock Holmes," and it just grew on.
It's great though, like great tagline for a book, but to be fair, it tells you exactly what it is you do, and it makes sense even in conversation with you that you're looking for the root cause, which is effectively the Sherlock Holmes. I went through a big... Go on.
But that makes my job so exciting, because I love it when someone comes and sees me and they're very low, and someone said that you will never run again, or you can't do something that you loved that you've always done. So I just like to have an investigating time of that person and kind of have a plain piece of paper and have diagrams saying, okay, well, we can try this, we can try that. Okay, like it's the FA Cup final and we need to get this player fit, or this person used to run, and if she doesn't run, she isn't going to feel happy about herself. So it's my mission to do the best I can, the best practice to get her to that run again, and I let them be part of that journey too. That's what does it for me. I get such a good feeling when they overcome that pain.
This is going to sound like it's an out-of-the-box question, because we've been talking about the importance of prevention and all of that as we go through. But with those high-level athletes, and because you've worked with people preparing them for Olympics and FA Cup finals and championship games that they need to be at peak level performance, but have you ever had an athlete that surprised you? Meaning that you thought, nope, this isn't happening. There's an injury here, there's a problem here, and they performed, and you just thought, I don't even know how they did that. I'm just curious, as someone who works with those high-level professionals, if you've ever seen that in terms of, because I'm big on the mindset and the a mindset and the approach that these athletes take. But I'm just curious, as someone that's worked with them, have you ever been surprised in, good or bad? It might be on either side of the spectrum, but you don't have to necessarily give an example if you don't feel in terms of the person.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So a good one. So I had the pleasure of going to the Rugby World Cup final. There was a rugby player that had a calf tear. It was a really serious tear, and he flew me out business class to treat him. I just treated him twice a day, and we just was on it, and it was a bit hit and miss. We were thinking, would he be back in time? And he was able to go to the final. It was just a pleasure being part of the whole process, because he was worried that he wasn't going to play, and he played. So these things happen, but that's why I love this job, because it's pressure. I just love the pressure in terms of sports. When someone said that someone will be out for months and then you get them back quicker.
What's been the biggest surprise to you? I had Dr. Kevin Stone on the podcast, who is the Stone Clinic in LA. So he's worked on people like Kevin Durant on their knees, etc. And he was explaining to me about their rehabilitation and the advances in the last 10 years with the different therapies that are out there. Is there anything in the last 5 or 10 years that you've seen, James, that's really been like, wow, this is where rehabilitation is moving towards, or something that you're like? I remember back, I'm 34, nearly 35, but I remember when someone did a cruciate in the Premier League or in GA, my sport, in the 90s, they're out for 6 months. And now people are coming back in weeks as opposed to months, because of the advancements in different rehabilitation and different strategies, and people such as yourself that are experts in their fields. But is there anything you've seen over the last 5 or 10 years, or even in more recent times, that you're like, wow, this is where rehabilitation and sports injury prevention or rehabilitation is moving?
Oh, 100%. And the first thing that popped into my head was Achilles tendons. Achilles tendons, seriously, 5 or 10 years ago, if someone had a complete tear of the Achilles tendon, you would think that it's game over. They have lost their speed and their power. There was no way that they're going to come back quicker. And one good example is Anthony Watson, really good friend of mine. So he's an England rugby player, fast, just like a 100-meter runner, So he tore his Achilles, and he tore it twice. He got back fit, and we got him back fit for the England Rugby World Cup, and he was fast. He was still fast. He didn't lose his speed. He even got faster, And you got a question: would that have happened 5 or 10 years ago? I don't think so. Surgeons are so good, so there's different techniques now, and that makes it amazing. And the rehab's amazing too, because rehab I do like, because it's all about dosages. So it's going back to that pain level, the pain rating. So I go by every single day when I rehab somebody. Of course, the research is amazing, and I always use it. But if somebody can do a functional movement without any pain, I would get them to do it. But it might just be that, it might just be a couple of seconds of doing it, and then next week might be a minute. Then the next week might be 2 or 3 minutes of doing it, or it might be little reps, and then building up to more reps or more sets. So that's how I do a rehabilitation. So it's getting them to do a functional movement that doesn't hurt. And if it doesn't hurt, that's a good sign. If they feel more than a 6 out of 10 when they're doing it, we like to say stay away. It's not the safe zone. Let's just drop it. And if it's a 2 out of 10, maybe we just do little dosages. So everything is calculated, but just being very careful.
I love that. And again, it's listening to your body. I think that 1 to 10 scale 100%. And that safe zone, that language even for people is so helpful for themselves, and again, working with their potential professional. Talk about then, to wrap us up, and I'll give links and everything to the book for everybody listening. As I said, great tool book for people to have in terms of helping themselves with their injury and that body freedom that you speak about. But talk about the monthly overhaul treatment, and this is kind of the way you wrap up the book. It's kind of towards the end of it, but talk about the MOT, which I loved. When it comes to a car, talk about the monthly overhaul treatment.
Everyone needs an MOT. I need a big MOT. So it can be, after working so hard in a month, you have to treat yourself, because as I said, we've only got one body. So that could be anything. So I get people thinking, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to a spa? Do you just want to go for a ride somewhere. It can be anything that you really love, that it like gives your body a breather, because I think that's what we lack in our lives, and it makes me really, really sad. I honestly, like, because I've seen so many people, different walks of life, famous or not, and some of these people don't think about themselves, you know, and they just need to have a reset. They just need to do something for them. So it can just be going to see a therapist, going to a spa, as I mentioned, or just taking a day off, because that can get the body to readjust, and you can move forwards to the next month and be more energized.
What's your version of that? What's your, for example, I go to weekly deep tissue. That's my self-care protocol 101 religious every single week. What's your version of that? Do you have, is it a spa? Is it just going out into nature for a walk and thoughts to yourself? What's your version of that, James?
Treatment. So I get treatment. So I get a 2-hour session, and that works for me to cover the whole body. And my reset that I do every day, as I mentioned, is the ice baths and the saunas. But that 2-hour session once a month does it for me. I just feel really, really good.
Full body, or do you focus specifically on what area needs work for?
Because me as a therapist, so in terms of massage, I would treat everybody. Everybody. I would treat every aspect of the body. Yeah. So I would even treat the tummy, because I do talk. There was a section where the abdominal area is so important, because just above you've got the diaphragm that's normally tight in loads of people. So because people tend to breathe from their neck and their chest, and they don't really open up the rib cage. So half the time when I'm treating somebody there, it's very, very stiff. And then I do visceral massage, so that's what osteopaths are known for as well. So we like work on the large intestine, the small intestine. So someone might be bloated or constipated, and people don't open up at first, but only when I place my hands in there, they're like, and I ask them a question: do you feel bloated? Because I can feel something here. And they said, yeah. Massage is amazing. So I do massage on the face, the front of the neck, the chest, everywhere.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
James, I've one final question. There's so much in here, and as I said, I will link the book for people where they can find it, and your social media channels, etc. But final question, you've been on your own journey, and between your own dreams and then how that changed and transitioned over the years to working with all these incredible athletes and people who are at the high end of their field in what it is that they're doing. What's something you know now that you wish you knew back when you started, you know, particularly 18, 19, 20, because I know the journey changed a few times, but what's something that you know now that you wish you knew back then?
I think it's having the right team. So I'm so lucky that some of my clients have a wealth of experience, but I basically have someone or a group of people who I talk with an hour a week to just brainstorm and think of things that I'm doing right or things that I'm doing wrong. If you take that away from my life, I wouldn't have written a book. But I wish in my 20s, so I'm 35 going on 36, I wish in my 20s I had that team, because I could move mountains, I can do amazing things. But the biggest thing with me, so I'm not sure if I've stammered in this podcast that I've done. So since I was 6, I suffered from a stammer. And that affected me a lot. And I was so worried what people would have thought about me if I stammered. And it's still there. So I have a covert stammer. So it's that iceberg analogy where the overt stammer, you can see it in every sentence and you can pick up on it. But I avoid words at times, or I used to avoid words. And that was so exhausting when I used to talk. So this R or S words. So going through this whole process of having a team and people helping me, I'm able to do a podcast, something that I thought I would never be able to do or go and give public speaking. It goes back to that first chapter that anything is possible, and you don't be hard on yourself, but have a team that you can go back to and talk, because something like that can get rid of the stress and anxiety, and that can even be your monthly Overhaul treatment, having that time to speak to somebody. And that's the best thing.
I love it. James, what a wonderful way to finish the podcast. I can't thank you enough for your time, for what you're doing. I think this book is going to help so many people. It's one of those that, for those who have a history of injuries and who are trying to stay on top of it, jump straight into what's going to be applicable for you in terms of the chapters. You can read it all the way through. I am going to read it all the way through, but I jumped straight in just so that I could kind of geek out with you a little bit on this podcast. For the book, where's the best place for people to find it, and where's the best place for people to find you online? Is it through Instagram, through the website? Any of those links you want to give, please give them now.
Thank you. So the main place is Amazon, and then the major bookstores like WH Smith and Waterstones. And my social media tag is James D Health, at James D Health. So I'm on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So.
And the website, is it risinghealth.co.uk?
Yes. Yeah, that's it.
Brilliant.
Perfect.
And I will link everything we talked about in today's podcast. The book links will be in the description, the Instagram, the website. Go check out the book. Go check out James's channels in briankeenfitness.com in the show notes, and in the link wherever you're listening to today's podcast in the descriptions. James, thank you so much for all you do, and I'll catch you again real soon.
Thank you very much.
There you have it, world-renowned osteopath James Davies on simple techniques and strategies to reduce pain, overcome weakness, and recover from injury. This is something that is definitely becoming a lot more of a hot topic for me personally as I try and upskill myself in the world of recovery and injury rehabilitation and prevention to a large degree. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast as well. As always, if you did, be sure to take a screenshot, pop it up on your Instagram stories. You can tag me. You can also tag James on his Instagram page, James D Health. And please pass it on. If you think it'll help any family members or friends, please pass on the podcast to them and let them know they can check it out wherever podcasts are found. That's all from me for today's episode. Catch you all next Monday.